Attention, please. Eastern Airlines Flight 19, now ready for departure.
Welcome aboard the Walt Disney World Express monorail. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're entering the vacation kingdom of the world.
There's enough land here to hold all the ideas and plans we could possibly imagine. We call it Epcot. Will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of the Retro Disney World Podcast, taking you back to the vacation kingdom of the world, the way it was, and the way it is in your memories.
So tonight we'd like to welcome Jim Sarno to the show. He was a model builder and over at Disney, and we're going to talk about a lot of his different inner workings at Epcot and other portions of Walt Disney World over his career. So Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So Jim, to kick it off with all of our listeners here, maybe you could give us a little background on how you got into Disney and the story behind that.
Like any Disney fan, I'm sure you guys feel the same way. I mean, 5 years old, I go to Disneyland, and all I can think is, well, I know what I want to do. I think people go there and don't realize that that's a career that you can head into. And I think especially for me, because I had ears that stuck out, I was tormented by the school kids. And of course, my name was Dumbo. So when I get to Disneyland and I see Dumbo there and everybody loves him, and all the other characters have big ears, and I said, well, I definitely belong here. So that's how the dream began. And then I went on to college and I studied toy design, which I realized was all in New York, and I was a California kid, even though I was born in Chicago. And I said, well, what else could I do? And I got into the studios, and I started with Sid and Marty Krofft. You remember H&R Puffin Stuff and Wonder Dog?
I mean, I was raised on those shows, so
okay. The guy who hired me was, and I'm blanking out on his name right now, Ken Forsey. Do you know that name?
Do not know that name.
Okay, very involved at Disney, at Disneyland, doing the Country Bear Jamboree.
Okay.
And he was back in the old times in the model shop. And he was the head of the model department at Sid and Marty Krofft. And he is the man who invented Teddy Ruxpin.
Ah.
Okay, so he got that idea from working on Country Bear Jamboree. Said, wouldn't it be great if kids had their own talking teddy bear? So while I'm working for him at Sid and Marty Krofft, he is working on Teddy Ruxpin. And when he got that off the ground, he said, Jim, you'll be coming to work with me when this happens. And sure enough, it was a big success. So that was my start. From there, I went to Hanna-Barbera, worked on the characters there, and then went to the Muppets, worked on their full-size costumes. And because of my work at Hanna-Barbera and the Muppets knowing how to do full-size costumes, there was an ad in the paper for a job at Mapo. And it was doing fiberglass body parts for the animatronics.
Ah, okay.
Actually, Ken had set up an interview for me with the model shop years before. And I had the interview. They were waiting for the contract with Tokyo Disney, kept getting delayed. And they had told me, you're going to be hired. We want you. Never happened. So years later, I see this ad for Mapo. I said, I can make body parts. That's my way in. So there I began with fiberglass. And if you know fiberglass, it is torture.
Yeah, it is.
And my boss there was Rick Golding. And every day he'd come by, Jim, how do you like your job? How do you like? Because in the interview, he said, you look like you belong in the model shop, not in Mapo. And I didn't think there were any jobs in the model shop. So I said, oh, no, I love fiberglass. So every day he would ask me, I would say, oh, I love my work. I love it. One day at lunch, I wandered over to the model shop. And like any of us, it was a kid in a candy store. There they are with the Epcot model, and everybody's building these fun little miniatures. And I just said, wow, He's right. I belong in the model shop. So I took his advice. I actually talked to Maggie Elliott, who was the manager there, and she said, "I'd like to hire you. You look like you've got the skills we need." And she said, "So where are you now?" And I said, "Mapo." She says, "Oh, sorry, can't touch you. Your union can't bring you over here." So back to my fiberglass work, and I said, if Rick asks me one more time, I'm going to have to tell him what I'm thinking. So sure enough, he asked, and I said, well, I was at the model shop. Maggie'd like to hire me, can't do it. He says, come with me. Took me to his office, made a call to her, and he looked at me, he said, you're not to breathe a word of this, but on Monday, you report to the model shop. I got you in there.
Oh, fantastic.
And talk about a magical experience. So if you can think it, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can dream it, you can do it. Right?
So I don't want to. I feel like we shouldn't rush past Teddy Ruxpin because that was such a breakthrough item. It's not Disney, but that was such a big deal when that came out.
It was the beginning of that Toy of the Year kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was so related to Disney because the originator worked on Country Bear, and that was his thinking. I'm going to make a teddy bear that kids can hold and that can sing and talk. And it was all based on his experience working on Country Bear Jamboree.
Oh, that's amazing.
A little unknown connection there.
Yeah, I did not know that. I've seen teardowns of it, and it's just so mechanically complicated with all the gears and things. But it worked. And
it worked.
It worked. That year, that was about what, 83, 84, or was it a little later than that?
About maybe 85, because
85. Okay.
I left WED in 84, and it happened a year or so later. And I was there sculpting the characters, so Teddy, Grubby, the little fobs. And then we sent over to Asia for all the interior parts, all the electronics and computerized work. So that was all sent over there and then brought back. And off it went. And this was from Ken working in his garage on Little Teddy Bear.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Built an empire with an idea from that he got from working at WED.
How cool. And then your costumes, were those used at Kings Island, the ones that you did for Hanna-Barbera, or were they used in other places as well?
I'm sure they were there. They were here at Marineland.
Oh, okay.
So we were doing the full-size costumes of all the characters, Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones and Hong Kong Phooey.
I saw that picture of the Hong Kong Phooey costume and I was like, oh God, I wish I would have seen this. Because I love, as bad as that show was, I loved it when I was a kid. I mean,
well, when you're a kid and you see all those things and then you grow up and you realize I get to go in this place where they make these things and I'm going to do it. It was like a dream come true.
Yeah, I mean the whole Sid Marty Krofft thing too. I mean those guys were titans and still are. I mean they're on producing television still today. So
yeah,
it's amazing.
They knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So I before we open the show, Jim, I mentioned how the land pavilion fountain is really one of the things that we really want to focus on, talk about tonight. It's something that not only ourselves but our listeners and everybody else, fondly remembers as such a centerpiece to the center of that pavilion. So for those listening who do not remember, when you used to go into the land pavilion down in the very bottom of where there was the food court, what was it called, Brian? Was it the Harvest Festival Harvest?
The farm market.
Farmers market.
Market. Yeah.
Yes. There was this wonderful all-white fountain with a blue rim around the base, and it just really set off the place. So, Jim, maybe you can give us a little bit of information about that, how it got started, and the whole process of making that, and maybe if you know where it ever went.
Yes, I've heard rumors of where it went. I hope it's in storage somewhere, but it all began when I found my way into the model shop. And my first day, Maggie said, come with me. And I went to meet with Rolly Crump and Walt Paraguay. Now, I didn't know who these people were, but I had a feeling they were big shots since they were located in what we called the Gold Coast, where all the head designers were. And I was invited to meet them, and we had a short little meeting. They explained what the fountain was. Walt had done a little two-dimensional drawing of what the idea would be with the 4 food groups. And the design was very simple, but very thorough. Rowley was in charge of everything. Walt was in charge of the fountain specifically, as well as the balloons that rode up above it, and many things in the land pavilion, including the outside mosaic. So there began my relationship with Walt and Rowley. And when I came out of the meeting, Maggie said, well, how'd it go? And I said, well, I'm a little shocked that you're bringing me in to do such a giant project, especially with these guys. She said, well, you said you wanted to be in the model shop. Let's see what you can do.
Nice.
So there was my challenge right off the bat.
Trial by fire.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. She said, make it or break it. And if you can't handle this, you don't belong in the model shop. So the challenge was on, and the great relationship with both Rowley and Walt began there.
That's cool. So did you start with a small scale model of that and then eventually work up to the full size one, or what was your process?
Yeah, that's always how we did it. We started, and of course you probably know that Disney worked very differently than anyone else in design. Many design firms do their drawings, their scale models. Everything is done prior to building, where we worked in reverse. We built the model. He wanted to see what would happen physically and three-dimensionally. And then if it worked out, then drawings were made after for the building of whatever ride you were working on. So we worked with a green foam, somewhat like florist foam, a little more rigid.
Okay.
And I began with that in a dome shape, cutting it into the 8 sections that it was, and then sculpting in it with little sculpting tools to get the fish and the different designs that Walt had drawn on this small piece of paper I got. So that is how it began. Then it was coated with a resin, and then we color lit it to see how things were going to work. And the whole idea was that top trough or dish was going to catch the water and then trickle down and create these patterns as it fell down into the larger bowl.
Nice. So that's it. So all the little carvings into it then would sort of make the water go in different places as it hit it and then roll down. Nice.
Exactly.
Nice.
So that had to be part of the consideration as I sculpted, that I needed to realize that when the water was flowing, to make sure that the edges were not curved too much, or there wasn't too sharp a cliff for the water to splash. So there's a lot involved with the balance of it, and then the design allowing the water to flow down beautifully.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a picture of the it must have been the model that was lit that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
That looks so good.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it looks so good.
Well, I know. I think if they would have done it with those colors, it would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But like I said, that was all done with this rigid foam. And there's an interesting story because the top was designed, I think you may have seen the picture that had the color lit model with kind of an abstract shape on top.
Yeah.
And we did these models, and then Marty Sklar, John Hench would come in and evaluate what they thought and give me their input. Well, it happened to be a day that Walt wasn't in, and so it was Marty, John, and myself. And they said, well, we love it. I think it's going to work, but we don't like the top. We'd like another idea. And I said, okay. They said, can you do something by tomorrow? Well, that's how things happened there. So I took a block of foam home with me into the shower, pulled the curtain, and carved away because this foam would float all over the place. But I knew this was my chance to do something that would wow them the next day. So I thought, well, we're talking about food and vegetables. I'm going to make somewhat of a leaf pattern. And so I did. And the next day they said, that's it. We're done. Let's go on with the full size.
Wow.
And so then from that model, then a metal sculpture or armature is built, which was welded together. And then slabs of white styrofoam were laid on top. And each of the 8 sections were independent. They rolled around, and then I laid up clay on top of that to then sculpt what I had done in the miniature.
Oh my gosh! So you ended up doing the full size sculpt as well as you had the whole thing then from beginning to end.
It was very unique in that usually you did the model and then it was sent out for somebody else to fabricate.
Right.
Somehow they were happy. Walt and I were hitting it off. A lot of people had a hard time working with Walt, and somehow he and I hit it off, and his designs and my sculpting all worked really well together. So you're probably familiar with Blaine Gibson.
Yes.
The head sculptor there at the studio. And he had heard that I was doing this fountain, and he came to Maggie and he said, I'm glad you're doing this, but this really is in my department, and I think Jim should move over to my department and work on it there. Well, I didn't have a lot of sculpting background, but somehow he and Maggie worked it out that I would stay in the model shop and that he would come over and work with me and make sure I was doing it properly. So what a treat that I got to work under Blaine as well.
Nice.
Yeah, it was quite a project. I don't know if you heard about this, and I never spoke of it, but I will now. In those days, nobody's name went on anything.
Right,
yeah.
Nobody knew who did anything, and I had heard stories of little secret things that were done. And I said, well, I'm Italian, and we do like credit for what we do. I said, now, how am I going to do this? And I never even told Walt about this. But in the fish panel, with all these curves, I said, I'm sure I can design Sarno into this about 6 feet across, and nobody will know. So a little known secret is that I carved my last name in the fish panel because I needed to go there and know that I knew my name was on the thing.
It's funny because I think how we've only learned that there's very few places where that's made it in. I believe we spoke of the Fort Wilderness map has the name in there, and Jim telling us about this. So how can you think of any others that
the only places that we know that people were officially allowed to do it were like Mary Blair's name and the other credits on the tiled mural in the Contemporary, and then a couple of Dorothea Redmond, and I forget the gentleman who actually did the tile work in Cinderella's castle, and they were really the only ones that got to officially have it. And then at Epcot in the FutureCom, the AT&T, not the main Spaceship Earth, but like their facility with their kind of like trade show stuff. There was a theater that was done by a husband and wife team of illustrators that was then made dimensional in a little display called the Age of Information, and they actually named the theater after the artist Eitzel. So that's very few and far between. That's cool. Now I'm really sad that the fountain is gone because I'd like to go and see it.
I'm scouring pictures right now, trying to find the fish, and then try to make
fish panel up at the top. It was funny when I went to the opening. A couple of buddies that worked together, we all went there, and as we were walking around, we heard one of the tour guides training guides, and they pointed out. They said, "Now this is a fountain sculpted. We don't know the artist's name, but we've heard his name is sculpted in the fountain." And I could have run right over and said, "Yes, it's me, and here it is." I said, "Jim, just stay quiet. If you say anything, they'll obliterate it." So I said nothing, and it stayed the whole time it was in.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's great.
That was
fun. I'm going over pictures now. I'm determined to find it.
I'll have to send you one that I've got a close-up of it so you can see it.
Oh, that'd be great.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Do you have any like little models of the fountain or anything?
No, I kept nothing of the model of the fountain. So, nope, I don't have anything. It makes me think of Smart One, which we may talk about or not. But when I designed Smart One, I was smart enough to make a second one.
Oh.
Yes.
So do you have it?
I do.
Oh, wow.
Wait a second. Wait a second. Like,
wait,
is he
let's
sitting
just-
right by you? Is that?
Can he still wave to us?
Well, George McGinnis was the head designer, and the way it worked was there were the head designers that did the sketches, came up with the ideas, and then they bring them to the model shop. And one day, George McGinnis, I guess Maggie would assign us to who's going to work on what. And she said, meet with George. He's got a robot idea. So I meet with him, and on a napkin, which I'm wondering if I still have that napkin somewhere. He drew a little sketch of Smart One and said, can you do something like this? I said, okay, that's my job. So I left work, went to a hardware store, picked up plexiglass, wood, knobs, you name it. And the next day I got to the bandsaw, chopped it all up, and made sure I made a second one. And as soon as he saw it, he said, you did this today? I said, I guess it was meant to be. And what I called Robbie the Robot became Smart One, who I know is having a resurgence of popularity lately. So.
Yeah.
Yes, he absolutely has. We know somebody who has created a 3D model of Smart One. It was a big topic when we talked about Communicore East on our Communicore East episode. It came up a lot. There's not a lot of recorded footage and dialogue. More photos have popped up recently. We're still looking for more of the dialogue and stuff. So can you tell us like some of the everyday objects that would be hidden in there? We always wondered what his eyes were and what they were meant to be. I think you thought they were supposed to be two tapes, right? Two reel-to-reel data tapes.
Like reel-to-reel. And they are actually just a slice of a wooden dowel.
Really?
That's what I made them out of. The ears are knobs that were like for a dresser. I actually went to a home improvement, I think it was called Home Improvement Store or something like that. Just a typical hardware store. And the body was a plexiglass tube that I cut, as well as the head was a plexi dome. And I cut it so that it would have a bit of an angle on it.
Right.
So all of it is really knobs and cylindrical tubes of plexiglass, and the wood and plexiglass glued together to look like this little sketch that George had given me.
And how big was the mock-up that you created? How big was he?
The model I made was about 1 foot tall, and then the actual was about 2 feet or close to it, I think.
So
this original one was.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, the original one is the one I did. And then again, when they were pleased with something, then they would take it and do the drafting sketches of it to then build the full size.
And do we know who built the actual full size one? Was that given to a different department?
It was given to a different department. It might have gone to Mapo, or it might have just went down to Florida. I'm not sure.
That's so cool.
But usually these things, when they left you kind of waited till you saw it on show. It was interesting with the model of the fountain. I'd done the full size. It got shipped out and made in fiberglass, cast off of the clay. And then it was going to be sent to Florida, and that was it. And I said, well, what about the installation? I said, I've been on this from the beginning. And Maggie said, no, we have other people working on it. I said, look, I really want to go and follow this through to the end. Part of it was, of course, who didn't want to be flown down to Florida to work. But the other part was I had that name that needed to be. So at the last minute, she somehow took mercy on me and said, okay, you can go down and follow through and make sure it's installed properly. So she said, we can't get you a commercial flight. It's too late. She says, tomorrow you're going on the Mouse.
Nice.
Wow.
I didn't know what the Mouse was, but I arrived at Burbank Airport, and Walt Disney's private jet. So, gee, what a shame they couldn't get me a flight on United, So I got to fly down there on the Mouse, which was a real highlight of my life. So
that's
oh my
awesome.
Goodness.
So were you able to hide Sarno there as well, or is that a kept secret?
No. That the full size, I actually did it in the miniature, and then in the full size, I sculpted it in clay, and then it was cast. And when I was down there, my plan was I wanted to be front and center with my name.
Yeah.
As it was going in, the guys that are working, they had put me up at Fort Wilderness. and then I canoed over to Epcot to work on this. So I show up and I'm telling the guys, no, move it one more panel to the left. And they're bitching and moaning, like, why do we have to move this thing? I thought, because when you're on the top and you're looking down at the fountain, I need that fish panel right in the center. It's got to happen.
Wait, so I just want to clarify one thing. So this entire creation of Smart One from sketch to signed off model was literally 24 hours. That's insane. That is so cool.
It surprised me as well. Things didn't always happen that quick and easy, but this was a no-brainer, and somehow you just, sometimes it clicks, and this one did.
Well, I think that's a testament to your talent, sir. So that's really that's what that's all about.
So I think what's fun is when you surprise yourself, this comes from somewhere else.
Right.
So were you able to get your name in Smart One somewhere?
I did not put my name, and actually Smart One was after the fountain, so I don't know why I wasn't thinking, but things happen as they do.
Yeah.
So I guess I looked at Smart One and thought, I don't know where I could put my name in that.
Yeah.
It was too slick, it was very polished.
So you know what? I think you could probably answer one of my burning Smart One questions.
What's that?
His chest, is it like a close-up of a printed circuit board? Is that what the idea was?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
You knew.
And then I was always trying to figure out if there was, like, the red LED lights, they were kind of in a distinct pattern, but was it just that looked nice, or was it supposed to be something in particular?
No intention with that at all.
Okay.
Just to make it, computerized, electronic, and it was the beginning of things then. So anything to make it look scientific.
Okay.
Right. And you said you used dials for the pupils of the eyes. What did you use for the reflectors and the kind of his irises? Was that other off the shelf stuff that you just cut?
That was actually just painted on there. And
really?
I guess when they did the full size, they might have used some plexiglass lens.
Yeah.
But in the model, it was just painted on the white dowels that were slices of wood is all.
Nice.
Wow. Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
really,
cool.
really simple. Very simple.
So there's another burning, question out there about Smart One is that, do any recordings of him ever exist or who lent the voice? Obviously it was masked with a fake computer. Again, it's one of the holy grails that we don't have a lot of that. Do you know anything about anything after it, when it went to installation and such?
No, I don't know what happened as far as how it was put together with the voice. I would think there's got to be something somewhere. And I don't know, the Sperry Univac, do they exist any longer? I don't even know.
They do. They're Unisys now.
Well, they might have some information if nobody else, but I would think that Walt Disney World had to have recorded him from time to time.
Yeah, we're hoping. We're still looking for stuff. So we do have some information on the fate of him. We did some research on Epcot robots, and I think, Brian, you're probably the most well-versed in some of the Epcot robots and where Smart One ended up.
So you probably know after they took him out of Epcot, he was taken to the Contemporary Resort where they used him as a prop serving drinks.
Yes, I heard that.
And then at some point while being cleaned, he was dropped or some way damaged by a Disney employee. So he was taken off stage, and eventually the fate we understand was they traded him to Florida Robotics in exchange for, and it's escaping my mind at the moment what they traded him for. But Florida Robotics got him in exchange for doing some other kind of work for them. They rehabbed him and then sold him on eBay.
I heard that.
Yeah, we had a listener write in and send us the gentleman actually had saved the eBay photos from the listing a number of years ago. So we have on our collection on our website the last known photos of Smart One. So
Wow.
we'd love to know where he, eventually turned up after that. And the search is still on. Let's put it that way. We will not give up hope.
No, if anybody out there knows, they need to let us know. So
Absolutely.
that would
We
be
keep
exciting.
asking.
Yeah.
We keep asking. We put out an all points bulletin.
But knowing that you have a
when-
little 1-foot model, that's just at least we know he's living somewhere,
He's living with his father, which I called him Robbie the robot. So,
We'd love to set up
when he was adopted.
we'd love to set up a meeting with you and Smart One where you can actually put your name on it finally. How cool would that be?
That's right. Sign it.
That'd be great. Okay, I'll keep you posted when it's put together. He's still in parts and pieces.
So now we've talked about the fate of Smart One, and so what do you know about the fountain after the rehab of the land pavilion? Did you hear anything about where that went, or if it was kept, or
Well, I knew that the reason they removed it was because Soaring needed their queue line to take up that space. And so all I know is that it was removed for that reason and then went into storage. But I never, it's not like they let the originator know anything. It goes into that deep cavern somewhere, and hopefully it exists, but you never know.
That's cool, though, that it actually they didn't just come in and destroy it, that it was actually taken apart.
No. Yeah, I believe it was. It was all in panels, and it was all bolted together inside.
That's awesome.
So I think they could have stored it in one of the warehouses, maybe to use it somewhere else someday. You never know. It might resurface. Yeah.
Could come back. You never
and
know.
we'll put Smart One on the top of it. Can you imagine that?
That would be great.
That would be really, really good. So staying at Epcot a little bit, I believe you worked a little bit on Journey to Imagination as well. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did over there? And I'm visualizing your purple color, and we got a purple dragon. I'm visualizing your white fountain, and I'm visualizing the all white scene in Imagination. So tell me if I'm right or wrong.
No, you've got a theme going there that I didn't even realize. But again, it was this foam that we were using to carve most of our things. And I was asked to do a little grotto where Figment lived. And so it was very small, maybe 1.5 feet round. And I think it might have had a mirror base. And it was just a fern kind of grotto with plants and leaves where Figment lived. And again, done in miniature. And then most of Imagination at that time, the whole model was done in white. Everything was painted white. And I don't know if you know, the models were always up at eye level. So Walt Disney's idea was to build the models up so that as you walk through it, you could see exactly what the guests were going to see and determine if it made sense. So this was all built up high. You walk through, it was all white and then lit with colored gels to give it the color.
Oh.
So I worked on that part, and also another area, and I don't remember what it was, but arches and things that were done in plexiglass. I remember with butterflies and
was it
birds.
Was it the art scene?
I think it was.
Okay.
And again, all these things were made with paper, plastic, wood, and then a lot of it, especially in Imagination, was color lit.
Yeah.
Kind of like we did the same with the fountain.
Right. Did Walt Pergoy also work on? Did he do the drawings for those things as well that you worked on? So did you continue to work with him in that section?
Yeah, Walt and I established a family friendship. I used to call him my art dad, and we were very close up until his passing. Walt was the typical artist that was so passionate about his work, and he was different than most artists there. And we all understood that Walt Disney had picked him because he was so unique, but he did not fit the typical Disney designer or Imagineer. But everything that came up, he would ask Maggie, can I have Jim work on this with me? And so we had this wonderful relationship, like I said, that lasted years past our work there. And I worked with him on many different things. So he often would do a little sketch, and then my job was to interpret that into 3 dimension.
Fantastic. That is, that section, those two sections that you worked on are probably most people's favorite, I would say. That
Wow.
So I understand that there was a more elaborate rainbow effect that was supposed to go on there, where Figment's holding the pot, and then the idea was that color would kind of come out with it. And
yes.
I guess they couldn't get that effect to work. But can you imagine today with all the projection mapping what you could do with that setup?
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, it'd be crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Almost every shape could be moving. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Things were so small that you could do it in miniature, but then when it got large, it faded out and it wasn't as concentrated as you could do today. So it would be a whole different look now.
Yeah, that section was just gorgeous. I mean, again, I have to acknowledge like the quality of the work that you did, because it is not an easy thing to take a 2-dimensional, drawing or painting and translate it into 3 dimensions. That is a skill in amongst itself. And I know you bring a lot to the table too. It's not just, you're not just copying. It's like you're inventing things as you go along to really make it work. So.
Right. When I was a kid, I don't know if you remember those tests we used to have with a flattened box, and it said, what would the shape look like if you folded it up and put it together?
Oh yeah.
That kind of stuff came easy to me. So there is something in the mind that's able to translate that. And I think that's a skill that I was born with, that 3-dimension just made sense. I'm kind of amazed when I see somebody do a realistic painting or 2-dimensional work. I do some of it, but my forte is in 3-dimensional work.
That's so cool. So I have another question about your work with Walter, and this is kind of along the lines of the signature stuff. So first of all, we've stumbled across. It came up on I believe HA Auctions, a lot of his early work for the land, and some gorgeous work, especially for the outside murals. Did he only do the artwork? Did somebody actually lay all the mosaic? Was he there for the laying of the mosaic? And there's also that rumor that he didn't like it to be symmetrical. Artists never liked that, so there was one single green stone put on one side. Can you lend any credence to that story? And was he there for that installation? It's everybody shows the tile and wants to run up and touch it and all that, but
yeah,
you being close to him, maybe the truth behind it.
We were down there together. So I was doing the installation of the fountain while he was outside working with, I believe it was a couple from somewhere in Europe that was doing the actual work. And Walt was right there, suggesting different stones. And he was totally involved with that from his sketch to the installation all the way through.
That's cool.
So that was a beautiful work of art that he was very proud of.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beauty.
So do you know if he put that green stone in? Was that his idea, or was that the other artists?
I don't know if I heard that, but I'll tell you, I don't think anything would have gotten past what he wanted. Because he was there purposely to make sure that what he wanted was what was accomplished.
Right.
So they were the laborers that did a beautiful job, but it was his design, and what he wanted is what happened.
Staying in the land pavilion for a second, do you know if there's any truth to the story out there that one of those balloons fell to the floor a few days before the park opened?
I didn't hear anything like that. I think I would have if it had happened.
Yeah, that's my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a major. I don't think they could have fixed it or reproduced that within a few days. They were big, and I doubt that happened. It could have happened months before, but not days before.
Okay.
He did so much in the land pavilion. A beautiful thing he did was the 4 Japanese kimono women that were by the restaurant upstairs, and they were the 4 seasons. And I actually have some of the sketches that he did for those.
Oh, wow.
I was fortunate enough to acquire a really large collection of his work from the early 50s all the way up to his last drawings. So those Japanese kimono pieces are with me, so I feel glad to have those.
That's and he also did he did the designs of the wall carpet in the Symbiosis pre-show area too, right? Is
Yeah,
that correct? Okay, because that
I
his
believe he did. Um, I don't. Have you heard the word Anne Malmelin, the name?
yes, I think so.
She did a lot of the carvings that were throughout the Land Pavilion, and I'm blanking out on another woman that did a lot of the designs that may have included that carpet.
Okay,
Uh, if I think of her name, I'll mention her. But
I know I've got that buried somewhere because I think
okay,
we're a little friendly with Tom K. Morris, and I want to say he gave us her name at one point as well as being the person who had worked on that.
yeah,
And I can't remember who it was, but
I believe her last name is Woodward.
okay.
She was married to Geoff, Geoffe, and like I say, I can't remember her first name, but she was very involved with a lot of the designs for Land Pavilion, for the carpets, the walls, a lot of that.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump out of Disney for a moment, but Disney related. You worked on Treasure Island Casino and the pirate show there. Did you do that?
Yeah, yeah, I sure did.
So you got to work with our friend Bob Gurr.
Yes, I did, and I wish I could remember the head designer there, but I can't remember his name. But of course, Steve Wynn wanted, a pirate idea like Pirates of the Caribbean, so he wanted Disney artists, and I was working for Dave and Conradine Holtz, who had the contract to put all of the pirate-esque look to Treasure Island. And they had gone shopping all over Europe. Trying to think of some of the places they went, but they purchased everything, sent it to a warehouse in Vegas, and then they had to go work in the Middle East on an amusement park and called me and said, "Jim, can you take this over?" So, it's not far. I was living in Monterey at the time. I flew back and forth and piratized Treasure Island and just made maps and journals and cannons and jewels and the whole bit. So that was a fun, exciting project. Something I wanted to mention, I don't know if I have much reference in my portfolio or on my site about Harriet Burns. You're familiar with her?
Yes, indeed.
Well, when I was put in the model shop by Maggie, the place I was right next to Harriet. And I had no idea who she was. She was a sweet Southern lady who was so prim and proper, and there I was. Later, I found out that I was in the same workspace that Fred Jerger had been in.
Yeah.
Do you know who he is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so this ties a lot of people together, but Fred and Harriet were very close, and also Walt Paragoy, as well as Blaine.
Okay.
So it was very much like a family at this time. So being next to Harriet and working with Walt, I got to meet all these wonderful people that became like family.
Nice.
And Harriet at the time, had any of you met her?
No, unfortunately, we never. I think she passed in the 90s? Is that? I'm trying to remember now.
It's been about 8 years,
Okay,
maybe a little longer.
So we didn't get started until after, and that's why we're so desperate to do this. It's like we realize it's like we've got to get out there and start talking to people before we miss our chance.
Well, it was wonderful when I was there. All the old timers were there to fulfill Walt's last dream, so they all came back to do this one last project. And how fortunate for my timing to be in there to meet all these people and hear all the stories. But of course, working right next to Harriet, we became fast friends and stories upon stories, and we became very, very close. So we worked together, and then the friendship carried on after even more. And there was a book that her daughter put together, and they actually asked me to speak at her funeral to talk about what it was like to work with Harriet.
Wow.
And she was a one-of-a-kind person that was so creative and so fun and charming, and actually started with Fred Jerger. at the very beginning of Disneyland. And there's so many stories about her, but one good one was when they were redesigning Disneyland Storybook. Some of our workers went down there. They were taking out all the original pieces and making them in fiberglass so they'd hold up. And so they brought back the windmills that were in Storybook Land that Harriet had made back in the 50s. And they said, Harriet, we're throwing this stuff out, and we know it's original Disneyland. You have to have these. And she politely thanked them. And as soon as they left, she goes, Jim, what do I want with this? I said, Harriet, that's original Disneyland. Nobody has anything like that. She goes, you can have them. So she gave them to me. And there were things that would happen. She was going to work on an animation desk. So they brought her an animation desk. It was from the warehouse, filthy, dusty. I said, Harriet, let me clean it up for you. So I'm wiping it down. I pull out a drawer, and these little sketches, I sent you guys a shot of the way I framed them. These little thumbnail sketches of pirates fell out. I think 5 or 6 of them. She said, Harriet, look what was in here. She goes, oh my gosh, that was Mark Davis's desk. And she said, those have been hiding in there for 30 years.
Wow.
I said, well, I'm going to take them and I'll ask him to sign them, you know. Oh, she goes, don't you dare. If you bring them to him, he'll say they're his. She says, you found them. Nobody knows they were there. You get to keep them. She passed on a lot of beautiful, one-of-a-kind things, let alone the friendship we had was just, she was one of the dearest people I've ever known.
Oh.
So to not mention how wonderful it was to work with her as well as many others.
That's so nice to hear.
Harriet was a jewel, one of a kind for sure.
I did hear, even though she was prim and proper, that sometimes her and Fred could get some dirty jokes going.
Oh, yes. In fact, at one time she said to me, Jim, I used to have a friend where we'd send dirty cards on our birthdays to each other. She says, would you like to do that with me? So in a very funny way, I began to be her Fred in the current time. And she started calling me funny little nicknames. And when she had passed away, I helped the family go through her things and help them understand what things were. And I can't even remember what the nickname she was giving me, but I found cards from Fred to her that had the same name on them. Oh. And I went, wow. I mean, you never know these things. And then all of a sudden you go, wow, I became him to her.
Wow.
And
amazing.
Yeah, she was prim and proper, but she could tell the best, dirtiest jokes. And she was a prankster that she couldn't stop playing with people. And she loved everybody. She was an amazing woman. I went to visit her when she had moved to Montecito, and she had just gotten a brand new piano. And I said, Harriet, I didn't know you played. She goes, oh, yes. I considered being a concert pianist, but I went into the arts. So she said, sit here on the couch. So I sit down, and she goes into the kitchen. She comes out, and she starts playing on the piano, but she's got a tray of appetizers. She's playing on the piano, and I'm like amazed. She gets up from the piano to serve me some hors d'oeuvres, and the piano's still going. She had bought a player piano, and her big treat was planning this gag on me. And you fell for every joke she told.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Amazing
oh
lady.
My gosh.
But, the artwork working for them was amazing, but the people were like people you would never meet. Yeah.
You certainly did get to work with quite a variety of of people, and we put you up there with them because I think the work that you've done, at Land and Journey and Communicore, just all awesome stuff. So I think everybody who listens appreciates the work that you did and the style and everybody's effort that went into creating all that stuff. And I wish we could say that Smart One was still there and your fountain was still there, but it's living on. Trust me.
They were for a time. Now I move on to others.
Weird little one-off projects that you ended up doing. I know you also did some stuff for it looks like New Fantasyland as well at Disneyland when they redid that.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned to you, my nickname was Dumbo, and I identified with him my whole life. And one of the first projects in the model shop, besides the fountain, was to redesign the Dumbo ride. And I thought, how ironic is that? And they said we want it to look like a Geppetto toy with a big key that you wind up this toy. So my job was to build a model for the new Dumbo ride.
Nice.
Which was, what an honor when that name was so important to me. I also worked on the Tinkerbell toy shop, designing palm trees in there. Oh, and a really interesting thing was designing the landing platform for Tinkerbell.
Oh.
Now,
wow.
yeah, this was, it was a simple little project, but the story with it is wonderful. She landed back by Thunder Mountain, and it was up in the pine trees, and it was a simple wood platform that actually had a mattress because it was a free fall that she was on with that wire. And they gave me the whole script, which I have somewhere, about how you handle Tinkerbell when she lands. And the whole story about Tinkerbell is very interesting because she was a recluse. She was an older woman who just came out every day by bus to the park to do her flight. And so to design this platform where she landed, and I'm reading the script that says, now when Tinkerbell lands, you tell her what an amazing flight she did tonight. And the crowds were crazy. And so there's this whole script about what you would say to her when she landed on this platform.
Wow.
So there was always something crazy and fun going on in that shop. And everybody was like a bunch of kids playing together. And you would never know that such things would be created from such a crazy, fun atmosphere. But maybe that's exactly what people think happened, and it really did.
I bet that fun just spilled into the design work. I think that's the thing. So,
Yeah.
It's infectious. It started at the beginning and it works all the way out into the park. And when you are out there experiencing it, it's like all of that energy, is still there and coming out to you.
Yeah, and there was an atmosphere of family. We were these quirky little kids that stayed at home and played with art. And all of a sudden you're an adult and you're working for the greatest company with all these amazing people, and you found your tribe where you think alike, you got quirky little things, and you found the people that are like you. So yeah, it was an atmosphere like nowhere else.
One of the observations we always make about Epcot is it was kind of that early to mid 80s period was like the apex of Imagineering, where you had all of the original generation coming in for one last mission, coupled with the best of the second generation, the Tony Baxters and guys like that that contributed, and so there's just this era of pristine stuff. And plus you had the initial original management there, and then the second half of the 80s with a lot of these people still involved, you had that new second wind in there with Eisner and Wells and all this investment, and you just got great stuff. And hearing the stories you're telling, you're right. It's exactly how we imagined Imagineering was back then.
It was everything that you would think. It was just a fun palace where we got so much done, but it was all done in fun and playful, and we had a great time. Of the Disney Museum up in the Bay Area.
Yes.
Because of Harriet, I got to know her family, and they're still very connected with the Disney family. And so I was invited for one of their movies about the family films of Walt Disney's family. So I was introduced to Diane Disney, and I was talking with her, and she wanted to know what my part had been, and I told her about Harriet. And she autographed her book to me, and she said, "I am so envious. What fun you must have had. I always wanted to work with Harriet."
Oh, my.
So to hear Walt Disney's daughter tell me she's envious of me, when who wouldn't have wanted to be Walt Disney's child? And her dream was that she could have been in that shop creating all the fun stuff.
That's really great. Can you tell me what you did with the Muppets?
With the Muppets, I worked with May Kanega at Hanna-Barbera. And of course, we were doing the full-size costumes for all their characters. She had got a contract with Jim Henson, and she was doing it in LA, shipping it. I'm not even sure where it went, but the contract was to do the full-size costumes for the Sesame Street live shows. And because we were already doing that, I got to work on all the characters and build those with her and a couple other guys that the four of us worked together. And then those went all over the country doing the Sesame Street live shows.
I'm curious if they still used your design when they brought the full-sized Muppets to Disney MGM Studios after they signed the agreement in 1990 with Henson, because they had them there doing meet and greets and stage appearances and stuff for a couple of years back then in the early 90s.
I would think at that time they did. When we originally, at Hanna-Barbera, we were making these heads out of neoprene, which is kind of a heavy rubber. And the worst part of it was that there was no ventilation. So we switched from this heavy neoprene, which was like a liquid rubber that would set up in these plaster molds. And so the group I worked with, we came up with vacuforming. So taking a sheet of plastic, dropping it over a mold that was half of the head, and you would trim it and then glue it together. And then what we did was drill large holes. So we made a plastic form of, say, Fred Flintstone, and then all these large holes were covered with foam rubber, and then the person inside could breathe.
Nice.
So that was what our contribution was, and that's why the Muppets was interested, because we were making a new costume that didn't torture the poor actor that was inside where they were sweating to death, you know?
And they're great-looking characters.
Oh, you know, when you've got characters like that to work with, your design is just trying to make it exactly as it's supposed to look. And, you know, the challenge of what materials, making sure the colors are just right. And, you know, with my kind, we're all very, very picky and very meticulous about making it exactly as it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So we've got a good snapshot of you in the 80s and 90s. What have you done since?
Well, I had lived in the Burbank area, and then I moved up to Monterey. Actually, I went to work at Burbank Airport with United Airlines. And after my career in the studios, I said, well, that dream was fulfilled. What's next? And I wanted to travel the world. So part-time worker at the airport, and I traveled all over the world while I still did art projects when I was called, like Teddy Ruxpin and other things I got called back to do. And then I moved up to Monterey and hooked up with McGraw-Hill, the publishing company. And after I left Disney, I went into teaching art to children. Oh. And so McGraw-Hill had buildings all over the country. And the president, who is my best friend now, he decided he wanted to put money back into the arts because the schools were cutting art. And so he was happy to find me that I knew display and that I could teach children. And I had about a 23-year contract with them, teaching kids all over the country and then decorating their corporate offices with the student work.
Nice.
Very cool.
Teaching art, became, I said I always did artwork for children. Now I get to do artwork with children. And I worked for the Boys and Girls Clubs up there and ended up doing donor walls with marble and glass, and I'm actually in the middle of redoing another one for them. So I continue to teach and do projects that are architectural or have to do with buildings, and it just keeps going on.
Fantastic.
That's great. That's great. Mm-hmm. I know I've gone through your website, and I commend you on your photography over in Europe that you did. I recognize Rothenburg, definitely. I was there just this past summer, and you have some beautiful alpine shots. So beautiful stuff.
And I'm sure go ahead.
No, I was just saying that traveling, for me, that was a second love. First was to work at Disney. Second was to travel and see the world. So.
The Tahitian art here is just stunning.
Oh, well, thank you. That, because of my trips with the airlines, in my life, I always heard of Bora Bora. And I said, before I die, I must go to Bora Bora. So I went, and they were making these beautiful Tahitian wraps called pareos. They would not tell me how they were making them, and I was determined to figure it out. So I came home, and I said, well, they're French, so I'm going to start with French dyes. And I figured out how they were made, and I just think they're amazing. And they're kind of a natural thing that happens with dyes and sun and plants, and very exciting to figure out how to do that.
That's cool. Is it kind of, is it sort of like batik, or, I mean, I won't have you spill your secrets.
No, I can't spill the secret, but it has to do with the sun developing the color.
Okay.
And you use natural plants and dyes, and it's just kind of magical. I'm into ceramics, and I love doing raku, if anybody knows or familiar with that. It's that magical thing that happens when you put things together, and then fire or sun or water kind of takes
over,
and
right?
turns it into something. Yeah, you can't even imagine what you're going to get, but as long as you have a good sense of design and color, then anything works. And it's always a big surprise to the artist what comes out of their own hands, you know?
Oh, that's so cool. I like that.
Yeah.
You know, that aspect of just fate, having its thing.
You have enough skill, you know the materials, and if you got a sense of color, design, and shape, then you just let it happen. And oftentimes when you start to do any art, you never know where it's going to go, and it takes you there. And you have to be willing to go where the art wants to go.
Wow. Well, I think that describes your career in a nutshell. Certainly.
Yeah. It's been long and winding and taken me places I never dreamed.
Yeah.
So.
And you took us places through that artwork that we never dreamed too. So we thank you for that.
Great. I'm glad to do that.
So Jim, I really appreciate your time tonight. I mean, this has been, so much information, and you've fulfilled a lot of our burning questions that we've had out there. And I think all of our listeners and all of us here, really, really thank you for your time. It's a wonderful chat, and hopefully maybe we can meet up someday and share some of our, wonderful Epcot ephemera with you, and souvenirs and all sorts of stuff that we got.
That would be great.
Todd's being modest. You'll be at the top of our invite list the next time we plan an Epcot event. So,
well, it's mutual admiration. I love what you guys are doing, and you're keeping the story alive, and that's what history is about. So,
well,
thank you for what you're doing.
So much of the big Imagineer names are attached to these projects, and stories like yours get to share with. Really, there are thousands of fans out there of this stuff. And it's only in recent years that guys like you are becoming known to people that, hey, they worked on this really cool piece of stuff that you love.
Right.
And
I was just saying it's wonderful that people want to know, at the time, everything was done by Walt Disney.
Right.
And for those of us working, we're like, yes, well, we know that, but we're doing it. And nobody knows who we are. And it's nice that it's all coming out now, and the secret is out.
Yep. And I think a lot of Imagineers, who worked at the time frame, and sculptors like yourself are like, hey, I've got these pictures. I'm going to share them. There's and we're seeing more and more people share the stories and the photos and what what they did. And like you said, it is important to keep this history alive. And there's a lot of people out there that Epcot and the time that you spent in the in Walt Disney World and working on it, that remember these attractions, and they're deeply ingrained in their personal memories. Hearing about them again, just it's all nostalgic, and it brings that memory back for them.
Oh yeah, and you're also inspiring the next generation of Imagineers that are going to come in to do.
And, Well, and as I teach kids, I get to tell them my story and then inspire them to dream and know that you can do what it is you dream about.
That's right.
A little aside. When I was asked to speak at Harriet's funeral, Marty Sklar was a speaker also. And when I finished, he said, Jim, you're a great storyteller, and you've got a good speaking voice. Have you done voice work? I said, well, little things here and there. He goes, I'm going to put you in touch with our people. So he put me in touch with the people in the studio that do the voice work for the parks and even some of the cartoons and wherever they need voices. So I'm now working with them, trying to put something together to be able to do voice work for them for the park. So
Nice.
Oh wow,
Very cool.
Well, you
Yeah,
will
I mean-
return, and that's awesome.
You
There
could
you
be
go.
you'll be Marty Sklar's last hire.
You know what I suggest? I suggest you do is you come up with a pen name. I think Midge Onras would be great. It's just like your name backwards. It would work perfectly.
I think that could be good. I'll think
Yeah,
one
that way
over.
you get it in audio wise. One other sculpture
right.
question for you I forgot to ask earlier,
Sure.
just because we are trying to find whoever came up with it. Do you know anything about the main sculpture at the beginning of in the entrance to Epcot in front of Spaceship Earth, the pyramid fountain or
Lucite,
spires, Lucite spires? Yeah, the fountain. Do you know anything about who? Who created that or anything about that?
No, I don't. I have a friend I'll ask and let you know what I find.
Okay, that would be great.
I thought you were going to mention the Spaceship Earth entrance, which I also worked on what was to look like a time machine when you get on the ride for Spaceship
Oh,
Earth.
yeah, going around.
So I worked on that model. And then as you went up, there were images that you were being taken back in time
Right.
to know where mankind started. So.
And
That
those
was another
strobe effects are still going as of today. So 30
well,
some years
something
later.
still exists.
That's
There you
right.
go.
That's right.
Well, we'll have you down to Florida sometime and ride Spaceship Earth with you, so we can all experience it
Hey.
together.
Yeah.
that's right.
The last
Much
bit of your
fun,
work
man.
still in the park. Yeah.
That's right.
It's still there. That's good.
That's cool.
Well, it was great meeting you guys. I feel like we're old friends, and someday we'll meet in person.
That's
Yeah.
great. I'll crash on your couch next time I'm in Northern California.
Hey, I'm in Santa Barbara now. It's not too bad.
Beautiful, beautiful. We're all coming then. Three
I'll
of us
build
live.
onto the house.
Three of us live in places with a winter, so
Yeah, exactly. So anything warm is
I know
good.
when to expect you then.
Yep.
Got it.
All right.
So, well, Jim, thank you very much for your time again. I really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. So, thank you everybody for listening, and Jim, thanks a lot.
Great. Take care. Thank you.
good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Follow Todd McCartney and Retro WDW on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Retro WDW. For all things Retro Disney World, including exclusive merchandise, visit us on the web at RetroWDW.com. On Twitter, follow our web designer Jason Bartell of Deepwater Studios at JasonDWS, our announcer Andre Gardner at Andre Gardner, and follow our hosts Hal Bowers on Twitter and Instagram at GoAwayGreen, and on the web at kingdomofmemories.com. For JT Kujar on Twitter at LS1JT, on YouTube at Rubber City Motoring, and on the web at rubbercitymotoring.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Brian P. Miles.